Hey, BT Community Groups, welcome. I'm so glad that you were able to meet today. Today we are 5 weeks into our Questions from God series, and before we get into the question, I want to invite you to just kind of do something with me for a quick second. I want you to, as best as you can, take yourself back to middle school gym class. Now, whether you're a good athlete or not, I think we can all identify with this type of story. Picture yourself in dodgeball or basketball or volleyball, and you are in the line to be picked. What sorts of feelings are you starting to experience? Are you feeling the anxiety of not wanting to be picked last because you know you're not good at that sport? Or are you feeling the pressure because you know you're good at sports that you want to be one of the first ones picked? Now, I think that that's an important place for us to go in our minds as we kind of jump into our lesson today, because our question from God is based out of Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8, where he says to the prophet Isaiah, "Who should I send? Who will go for us?" I know the question sounds a little bit different, but if we look at the bigger context, we actually start to see something pretty interesting. Because just a few verses before that, we see Isaiah have this major encounter with God. We see starting off in verse 1 up through 4, Isaiah has his interaction with God, and Isaiah's response probably is a lot like those feelings we had in gym class, where he says in verse 5, "Woe is me, I am ruined, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I have lived among a people of unclean lips, and because my eyes have seen the King and the Lord of armies." Now, obviously, this isn't a gym class getting picked for a team, right? This is not the pressure to win a game for you. This is actually there's much more on the line for Isaiah. But I think the anxieties kind of can identify with us in some of the same ways, where we recognize that maybe we are unfit for service in a team that we've been chosen for. And I look at Isaiah when he says, "Woe is me, for I am ruined." What he's saying is he recognizes that before God, he is a man who is unclean. And because he's unclean, he knows that means he has no place in the presence of God. He knows that he is unfit to be in God's company. And for him to say that he has seen the Lord also is something that he knows with the heritage of his people, as God has interacted with the Hebrew people leading up to this point. There have been times where God is on Mount Sinai and he hides his people, or he hides himself in a thick cloud, when the people were warned to keep away from the thick cloud because they knew that to see God was to approach death. So for Isaiah to recognize that he has been put in a position where his life could be compromised, and he knows that he's unclean, he is fearful for what's in front of him. But I love that before he even gets to the question, God intercedes. Where Isaiah initially feels unfit for service on God's team and in God's kingdom, God intervenes and makes a way. We see in verses 6 through 7, it says, "Then one of the seraphim flew to me, and in his hand was a glowing coal that he had taken from the altar with tongs. And he touched my mouth with it and said, 'Now that this has touched your lips, your iniquity is removed and your sin is atoned for.'" I want us to be confident about something. As we start to ask this question to ourselves that God is asking, "Who should I send?" Before we respond, we need to make sure that we don't count ourselves out of service to God, because just like Isaiah was unfit for the task in front of him, God made a way to equip him, to resource him with all that God required of him. And so for us today, as we answer these questions, I just want to encourage you, as God is asking you the question, "Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?" He might be asking you to evaluate your life so that he can start the redemptive work to make you all that he needs you to be, to resource you with all that he needs you to have to be effective as you go out in obedience for him. Community groups, I'm thankful for you. I pray that you are blessed today through these discussions.